Here's some aluminium round stock. You just saw me turn this one up in the lathe. Haven't actually turned a lot of aluminium, but the front finish here wasn't too bad. A little bit chattery on the top, maybe the speed was a bit quick. You probably heard that. I've got a few projects coming up. One is going to make a new belt grinder, and I need some aluminium round stock for the wheels. In New Zealand where I live, this round stock of aluminium is very expensive, especially when you go bigger on the diameters. So what I wanted to do was cast my own aluminium. I was looking at making a furnace to melt aluminium and then cast some aluminium into round molds, steel molds. Seen a few videos on doing that, so that's what this video is about. So I've seen a lot of videos where people make the foundry out of old gas bottles. In New Zealand we call this a 9 kg gas bottle, very common for barbecues, and I got this off our auction site. It's a little bit like, I guess, the eBay site in the States, but in New Zealand we call it Trade Me. But the gas bottle, although it's expired, it doesn't matter because I'm going to chop it open and use it for the forge. I've seen, most of the time they'll cut the top off the bottle, and then that's your lid. Then you drill a hole in the side here, and your burner goes in at an angle. You fill up the bottle with a layer of refractory cement, and to keep the insulation in there, and then the lid has some refractory cement in it as well, keep the heat in. So that's the plan for this build. So I'll go off and fill this bottle up with water. I've had that valve taken out at the top here for a very long time now. I doubt if there's any gas left in there, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to fill it up with water. That'll purge anything in there out, and then I'll be able to cut the top off and cut all this bent stuff off. That got bent when I was removing the valve. In the end I had to strap it to a post, then use a lever on the valve to unscrew it. They're quite tight, but once you break them free they come out pretty easy. Okay, so there we have it. We've got the top cut off there. I've gone through and just removed the sharp edges from the inside and the outside there on both the top and the bottom. The next part is working out how this top is going to work. I've seen some videos where the top is on a hinge and you'd have a handle and it would flip up like that. And I've seen other ones where they mount the gas bottle or cylinder onto some sort of trolley thing with a couple of wheels maybe, and they have a handle that comes up, and part of the handle mechanism allows you to push your foot on a lever which will lift the bottle up, then you can drag it to the side. So I'm sort of in two minds which to do. I think I want to have it on a trolley because the base is kind of narrow, and if I'm going to build something bigger here to stop it falling over, you know, the last thing you want is this thing falling over with a lot of molten metal in it. So I'm going to have to build a bigger base anyway. So I have some wheels here that were attached to an old hacksaw, electric hacksaw stand. So I'm going to use those wheels and probably make up a base. So if that's the case, we'll do the system where it comes up. You step on a foot lever, it'll lift up, we can just slide it out of the way, and then you can get access to the crucible in the foundry. So one thing I should have done, which I didn't do, was actually put a line down here before I cut it so I could line it up. Fortunately, I was lucky in this instance because there was a mark here that goes down the side and I was able to join that back up. So I'm just going to chuck a couple of marks down here. We will eventually take the paint off, but maybe that will be at a later point. So I know where the lid sort of fits on, you know, the best position now in relation to the cuts that I've made around there. Well, that looks like it might be actually all the right size as it is, so might not be too much modifications to do on that. Let's grab the one piece, have a look. Yes, I think that would work really well. Maybe we chop the front off a little bit and possibly bring the bottle forward. I'd have to chop these wings off here. I think we can bring the bottle forward. At the moment it's kind of over the back axle, and the last thing we want to do is for it to tip back that way. So I'm going to nip these wings off and we'll see how it sits a little bit forward. So I think this looks pretty good. It's well in front of the wheels, which is good. There was another YouTuber, Mark Presling, or aka Prezzo. He's based in Australia, and he built a foundry and a little cart like this as well. So I'm going to put his link down in the description to that video, because that's quite useful, because it actually shows you how he made the, you know, the top part with the handle, and it swivels around. There were a couple of issues he had, and talks through those, so it's quite good. You know, we always learn when we're watching videos from the people who've done this before us. So I'll put his link down in the description. Good to have a look at that video if you're planning on making one of these. Mark on his one made his you know, forge detachable, so he had bolts on there to bolt it all in place in case he needed to take it off for some reason. So I'll probably do something the same, since I have to do something with the bottom anyway. But it is well in front of the rear axle, so it's not going to tip backwards. This was, as I said, from my electric hacksaw, and I built a new stand for it, and I will make a video of that stand and all the features on it, and you know, at some point. But this was built for exactly the same purpose. Those hacksaws, you know, have a tendency, they just sit on the ground. Sometimes they have little toy wheels on the bottom, and when you lift up the handle, they always seem to tip backwards. So I made the wheels here sort of offset at the back to stop that happening. But I mean, it worked out absolutely perfect for what I want to do here. So good to, you know, reuse a piece of you know, equipment that I had made previously in a new project. Otherwise it just would have got thrown away at the dump. So the next stage is I'll look at what sort of bottom I'm going to put on here and how I'm going to fix it. So you saw me there cutting up a few parts on the bandsaw. I couldn't record much at that time because the neighbour was using a noisy power tool. So let me get you caught up on where we're at. So I thought I needed to do this end part here first. That way I can put the bottle on and move it around to where I need it. But this part's not going to change, so it's going to be fixed in position where it is at the end of these original runners. So I found a bit of angle iron. It was pretty much the exact size. I just needed to cut about 2 or 3 millimeters off the end and put the angles on. That'll get welded in there, and that'll strengthen up that back end, and it will serve as the support for our bar that goes up here, which I'll talk about shortly. I've designed the bottle to sort of be removed, so what I needed to do is cut a couple of bits of 5mm plate. They're going to get welded in here, and they'll have a hole in them, and then what we will do is put some strips across here and here, and they'll have a nut on the other side, and then we can bolt through the frame into the nut that's on that strip there, and that'll help secure the bottle. The bottle will you know, never fall off once that's been bolted down and secured. So once that's on there, I've sort of just marked everything out. I haven't welded anything in place yet or anything like that. But basically the bottle will, or cylinder will sit somewhere around there. This piece here will be welded to the end bracket, and how the mechanism works is there's a rod that goes down the center. Now this is a couple of mil too wide at the moment, so I'm going to have to turn it down on the lathe, but it basically will go down this square tubing and it will poke out down the bottom. So just imagine this piece is welded here. I don't have enough hands to do everything. So there's another square piece that fits on the top of this, or down this shaft, so the shaft goes down the center there. And this square piece is welded to the lid on the top. So basically the lid and the square piece and this rod is all one solid thing. So if you can imagine that this rod is inside the square part here, it will be able to rotate round. So that's basically how it works. The rod gets pushed up, and then we can pull the lid across to the side, swivel it around, and then once we've got it round to the side, we can take our foot off the foot pedal, which will drop the rod down, and the lid will come down, sit off the side. And then once we want to put the lid back, we can push our foot pedal down again, lift the rod up, lid goes up, and we can swivel it back down right on top of the foundry again. Okay, so I've welded that on. Not the prettiest welds, but there's a lot of penetration. I mean, that's never going to fall off. So the next part will be to weld these bits here in where the bottle sits on top of. But before I do that, I want to make up the bits that go in the bottom of the cylinder there, and I want to drill a hole through them set it all up, drill a hole through them both so that it all lines up with the nut that I weld on the other side. Okay, so a small change of plan here. To have these all lined up, to make it easier, what I might do is I might weld these pieces in the bottles first, and then I will line it up with the bits that are getting welded into the trolley part, and then what I'll do is I'll clamp them onto here, drill a hole right through, and then I'll tap the hole out in here, and then we'll be able to bolt from the bottom into the tapped hole. So I think that's probably maybe the best way to do that, and to make it all mount on properly. Alright, so they're welded on. I noticed that these are not actually parallel. I went by where I had marked it on the side of the bottle here and mounted them in that position. I thought I had the bottle lined up on the trolley properly. Okay, so after a lot of aligning and moving stuff around, what I might do is, you probably can't see it, but I'm just going to put a tack down the bottom here on both sides and in the front on both sides to tack these cross braces onto the bottle. Then I'll be able to drill the hole through those, and they will be in exactly the right place. So I'll drill the hole through those, break the tacks off, tap the hole, bolt it all back together, set it in place, and then I can weld these brackets in properly. So I think that's kind of lined up where I want it right now. So I'm going to weld those in, and then we'll go from there. Well, you can see I was a little bit out. Not too bad on the long one, but the front one there, I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't think it's going to matter too much. We're just going to drill some holes in here, and then we'll tap and thread them, and we'll bolt these back on, and then we will weld them in place. So what I might actually do, because it is a little bit crooked, I'm going to draw a line, and then that's going to be my reference line. Once I bolt it back in, it's going to move around this way, so I can line it up with the line that I've drawn, and then clamp it all down, bolt it down properly, and then I'll put it back in, and it should be all lined up with these lines that I've drawn on the frame. It's not that critical where these bolt holes are, but the bottom of the tank curves like that, so I just made it closer to the edges. This way, this one here, I'm a little, crooked here, so I don't have much room to move back, but I've got it closer to the outside of this round piece as I can, so that the head of the bolt doesn't go and bottom out on the bottom of the tank here. The battery went flat there. But anyway, I've drilled the holes here and tacked them.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
I apologise, I've missed quite a bit of video due to a few issues with flat batteries, and then I was recording and the memory card was full, so that stopped recording. So I've done a little bit more on here, and I'll just sort of explain what I've done since I haven't got any video of it. So drilled and tacked these holes here and bolted them all on, welded these two plates in. So that propane tank is now locked in there. Can be removed if we need to remove it. You'll see down the bottom here I've put the round bit there, so I'll just flip it around to show you what we've done. That's the sort of hinge that's going to be for the foot pedal to lift up the bar that's inside the square tubing. I've put the square tubing on as well there, as you can see. So basically what happens there, I'll just put this in. Okay, this is still not finished yet, but basically that's the hinge. I've used nylocks so they don't come loose, and I've sort of ground some flats on the end of the shaft so I can actually adjust the nylocks individually while holding the shaft, otherwise the shaft would spin. The shaft goes down the centre here, and it would sort of drop down so much. I'm not really sure at this point, so we'll work that out when we get the lid on. This bit here, I've drilled some holes in it, so they'll be plug welded onto the shaft. And the lid will sit on here like that. And then once this is welded to the shaft, there will be a bar welded across the top here, maybe some supports on the side. And so basically what happens is the foot pedal gets pushed down, that lifts the lid up, and then we can rotate it round out of the way. And we have access into the foundry there. So that's what we've done there. For the foot pedal, I was deciding whether to put a plate here or something else, and I decided to put a bit of this round stock just welded on there. That way it doesn't really matter which way you have your foot. The flat thing, it's, is it flat when it's up or is it flat when it's down? It kind of, with the round bar, it doesn't make any difference. So that's what I'm going to use for there, and it's going to go somewhere around here, and I'll just weld that on. I found a bit of round galvanized bar that I could use for a handle. In Prezzo's video, he shows bending it on a bender that he built. It's a kind of a copy of a Hosfield No. 2 bender. That's one of the projects I have on the list to do. I have actually bought the materials for it, but it may be the next project after this one. So in the interim, I'm not really sure how I'm going to bend that, or if I'm going to do something else, but I'll come back to that a bit later. So the next steps, what I might do is actually take the tank off and try and take all the paint off it, because we need to paint it with some heat resistant paint. This stuff here would just sort of burn up and you get smoke and stuff going all over the place. So I'll buff all the paint off, and then it can be painted right at the end when we're finished. So I started wire buffing the propane tank, and that was taking forever to get that paint off. So my wife's popped out, and I've asked her to stop in at our local hardware and pick up some paint stripper, so I'm going to try that method. But in the interim, I'll let you know what I'm going to do next here. So we've got the lid for the foundry. A lot of people will cut a round hole in the top here. So I found a bit of this square section, and I was going to use that. Will be easy to cut out the square hole for a start. And this is big enough. The inside diameter here is just over 80 millimeters. So, you know, over 3 inches. So I'll trace around that area there and cut a hole out, and then that will fit in there. The other thing that I was going to do, once this pops up out of the top, I was going to just weld a little bit of angle around the sides here like this, and then that would allow me to put the molds, if I'm casting into like a steel tube for making round stock, I'll be able to rest the tube up here on the top, and you know, there's less chance for it to come off with some extra support around there. So that's the plan for that, and we'll get that started. Now, just thinking before I do that, I have these marks where the lid lines up. So currently the lid lines up, you know, how it was cut off the rest of the tank, and the tank is actually mounted in a fixed position in the cradle. So before I mark this out and then cut out the hole and have this welded in, I want to know where the front and the back is, so that it's nice and square and I don't have it you know, on some sort of weird angle like that. So let me go and figure that out, and I'll come back and then we'll get straight into this. It's a perfect fit without having to grind anymore. Alright, so I finished the bit that comes out of the top here. Came up pretty good in the end, so I'll be able to rest things on here to heat the like molds and stuff, to heat them up before I do the casting. And that just fits in a hole like that, and we will weld that in. But before we weld that in, I've got the paint stripper, so I'm going to give this a bit of a crack and see if I can get the paint off this and the rest of the cylinder. What I'll do is I'll actually put a center pop mark somewhere, maybe along the back here on this line, just so that I can line the top up to the cylinder when I go and do the, you know, the mechanism for the swinging arm. So we just need to get it back in the same place, and when I take the paint off, I'm going to lose all this marking. Well, that turned out not as easy as what I thought it would be. So I mean, the paint stripper's fine, it does get the paint off. It's a lot of work scraping, and there is some little bits left over. I don't think these will be hard to get off with a wild wheel, but Still a little bit more work to do. I'll buff all this up and I'll buff up the rest of the tank. I managed to get the paint off with the buffing wheel, so it came up pretty good in the end. I have no trouble putting a heat resistant paint on that. So I think the next step is I'm going to weld this top flue or exhaust in the top here of the lid now that we have it all cleaned up. The other thing the lid needs is on the underside. You need to put some bars across here so that when we put the refractory in here, it doesn't fall out. You know, it's got more than just the adhesion to the surface to hold it in. So just some, I don't know, 8mm rods across, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Should be enough, I think. So that's what I want to do with that. Lastly, I want to put the foot pedal on the mechanism down here, and that will finish this part here off. And then all we have to do after that is weld the little piece here onto the bar and onto the lid with some supports, and then that's pretty much all of the welding done. I might just put a little, maybe a little bent U-shaped bit of steel at the front just so it can stay level. At the moment I've got it on a couple of bits of steel holding it up, and then that will finish all the welding off, I think, and then that will probably be it for this video, and then we'll move into part 2 where I will make up the refractory, drill the hole in the side here for the burner and fit all that stuff in. Did you see that? I have a piece on the bench and I have a piece still in the vise. Yes, that's right. I cut it in the wrong place. So I finished the foot pedal. Yes, I did cut it in the wrong place and I had to weld it back together. Came up alright, I guess. I mean, this ugly weld takes the focus off the fixed area. Okay. Luckily I'm not making parts for the space shuttle, eh? Anyway, let me get this together. So I've got the foot pedal pretty much done here after the small mistake. It's all back together. So that all works kind of quite good. So this goes up and down like that. So the next step would be to put on this piece here and fix it onto the lid. But before I'm going to do that, I'm actually going to put a bit of, because this square bar that comes up and the bottle, there's a little bit of movement in there. So I saw on Prezzo's video that he put a bit of, I think it was a bit of angle in here and just put a bolt in there on each side. So that's what I'm going to do next, and then after that I'll weld our square piece onto here and then onto the lid, and then the last part would be just to make something for the front. At the moment I've got it up on these pieces of steel, so we just make a little something to go at the front there to keep it up and level. I've just had a couple of turns on the foot pedal here, and I sort of just now realised that the bottle is not forward enough, and if you push your foot pedal down a little bit too hard, it is going to tip up because there's a lot less weight at the front here. So I think the only way to fix this is to bring the axle back further so that the centre of gravity is pulled back. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut that off and move it back, and I'm just wondering how that's going to work in. So I opted for a bit of angle iron on the bottom here, welded in. I think that's probably about 5mm thick, so that's going to be absolutely strong enough to hold that axle straight and level. I've put everything together, I've put the lid on, and I've tried it out. Operationally, this works very well. So foot on the pedal, and you can swing the door out of the way, or the lid out of the way. Now there's a couple of things to think about. One is, which way do I want it to swivel? And I think the best option here is to swivel it to the right. Otherwise, there's a risk of burning your leg coming across this way. And then once you let it go, there's probably going to be a lot of heat going down towards the ground there. So you don't want to start then trying to figure out where to put your foot to lift it up to move it back into position. So we'll go around to the right hand side, and what I did notice is that if you went too far, although the axle has been moved back and the wheels are well behind the tank now, when the lid swings around there, it becomes very back heavy. So I think what I'm going to do there is I'm going to limit how far that can come across, probably around about 90 degrees. That gives me plenty of room to get into the foundry to get the crucible out. So I'm going to put a handle up here somewhere, and I'll put something on the handle to stop the lid from going around any further. Another thing I noticed is that when you want to come back to place the lid back on the foundry, it's kind of hard to get it bang on. You can be a little bit off that way or that way. So what I was going to do was get a bit of metal, maybe something a bit thinner than this, and just put it on the side here, maybe shape it, and it will be as high as the height that the lid goes, and then when the lid comes round, it can hit that piece of steel, take your foot off, and then you'll be perfectly aligned. I've done a bit more on the foundry. You can see I've added a handle on, so that'll make it easy to transport around. I'll put a couple of handles on the lid as well. That's so that when you go to rotate the lid, this part here is going to be very hot, so you'll be able to push the handle to swing the lid around, and then of course you'll be able to push the other handle to swing the lid back. I've put a stop on this side, so when the lid comes right round, it will actually stop there, and then it can be dropped down. And I've also put a little lug just down here so that the lid doesn't actually move by itself, so you actually have to lift it up to move it. I was finding that without that lug there, even on the bench there, when I'm moving the machine around, the lid was starting to move around. So it's just a little bit of a locating tab to keep the lid in the closed position. I think the last thing to do is to just put a peg or something at the front, and maybe that bar with the accessory hooks on it, and then that will be the end of this video. So there it is. It's pretty much done in terms of the welding and everything. I'm just doing this freehand, so it might be a bit shaky. Sorry about that. So I put this bar at the front, so that's where I can hang the crucible tongs and crucible pourer. I was going to put some sort of little lugs that come out where I can put the molds and stuff on, but I haven't got any molds yet, so I don't know how long they need to be or how far spacings they need or anything like that. So I'm going to add that on later on. I might just put that on a strip of steel and then just bolt it onto the front of that bar there. The foot pedal works pretty good, so go down there and flick the lid around. It's a lot better now in terms of you know, the balance here, so I can feel that's positively pulling at the front now, and once I get some other items up the front, then that will make it a lot better. Anyway, so that concludes part 1 of this video, and in part 2 we'll get into the refractory cement and putting that into the main compartment and also into the lid, and then boring the hole for the burner. Thanks for watching.